IB Nation Sports Talk up and rolling. It is Tuesday, and we've got plenty of NFL draft talk coming up for you. Ryan Roberts will be with me here in just a second. After we talk some NFL draft, Jesse will be here second half of the show for Rapid Fire. So we got that going for us. So Ryan Roberts is going to pop in. Our old friend, of course, used to work with us here at Irish Breakdown. He's now with A to Z Sports and covering both college football and the NFL draft. So I said, hey, Ryan, I actually texted him last week. I said, hey, Ryan, what do you think? Next Tuesday, pop in the show, talk a little bit of draft. Problem was and is Ryan is currently on family vacation. But what we did was we talked, and that's the segment that you're going to hear. It's recorded. Long story short, recorded segment because Ryan is doing the family vacay thing, but was able to track him down before he headed off on vacation and able to talk some NFL draft. So we're going to talk top of the NFL draft, what's going on with those first few picks. Draft kind of gets started at number 3 with the New York Giants. What are they going to do? You know, what quarterback's going to be at the top? Who's, you know, what's this all going to look like? So Christopher, I see he's in the chat. He's popped in a lot of questions intended for Ryan. I wish that he could answer them, but unfortunately, you know, good or bad, still a lot of good stuff in here. Ryan, you know, we had to do the pre-recorded, so that's what it is. I don't know what to tell you, but we'll talk top of the draft and some Notre Dame. Where's Xavier Watts going to go? Where's Benjamin Morrison going to go? What's going to happen with Riley Mills? Riley Leonard, what's going to happen with him? A lot of other stuff, Jack Kaiser as well. So all that coming up right now. And again, rapid fire coming up after that as well. Here on IB Nation Sports Talk. Smash that like button if you would, even if your name is DK. Appreciate it. It's our old friend Ryan Roberts with us from A to Z Sports. Thanks for doing this, first of all, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, Sean, I always love coming on, man. I'm glad we can make it work.
I know
it's a little chaotic this time of year, man, but we're gonna get some sleep or some naps sometime soon here. You know, we'll be all right.
That's right. You sleep after the draft. That's what it is. Just like they said on Roadhouse. I'll get all the sleep when I need when I'm dead. So it's like
yes. Well, unfortunately, we're in a little bit of a cycle in my house right now where some kids like to skip naps, right? Whereas it used to be you can kind of get a little bit of rest when both the girls are napping around the same time. But now it's kind of like, someone needs to stay up to.
You're praying for sleep at this point.
Yeah. And my wife's on spring break, so I feel bad about her doing everything, you know? So I'm trying to do my best to help, but it's also like, hey, you know, daddy does have to make money at some point.
Right.
So it's
somebody's got to sacrifice someplace, right?
Right. Yeah.
Let's start. We're going to talk about some Notre Dame guys and where they might end up going in the draft. Of course, the first round is Thursday. What is it? Is it second and third on Friday, and then the rest of the draft is on Saturday? You know, it's kind of the way it's gone for several years now. So starting up top, how shocked would you be if it is not Cam Ward to Tennessee to start it off, and then Travis Hunter to Cleveland with the first 2 picks?
I mean, it's been Cam Ward number 1 overall for like 3 months at this point. Like even before before the combine, it was always going to be Cam Ward number 1. The only question early was, or the only question that has been consistent has been whether Tennessee would be selecting at number 1, right? Like there was some conversation about them potentially trading out if a team like the Jets before they got Justin Fields or New Orleans Saints at 9 wanted to come and trade up for number 1, or if it's even just Cleveland moving up 1 spot, or it's the Giants moving up a couple spots. Like that was the only overall question, right? But it was always going to be Cam Ward, and Tennessee's going to take him at number 1. Like there's no surprise there anymore. Like there hasn't been for several weeks here. Like he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. The Travis Hunter thing at number 2 is very interesting because it's been kind of back and forth on that one. Early in the process, I thought it was going to be a quarterback. But it seems like Cleveland at least is just set on doing the veteran quarterback thing for a year with, you know, Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco as some insurance, and then see what 2026 brings ultimately. So their best player available pick, I think, at number 2. The question has been, Abdul Carter, the edge from Penn State, to pair with Myles Garrett as your pass rush duo for the next X amount of years? Or do you want to go Travis Hunter? I think it's going to be Hunter ultimately right now because this team was the 32nd ranked offense in the NFL. And they, I think, need someone that has the ability to create some explosive plays, to just be a difference maker, be a game breaker. And I think that's ultimately what they're going to draft Travis Hunter to be. There was debate over wide receiver, corner, a little bit of both, whatever. I think he's going to be a wide receiver for Cleveland mostly, and they might give him a chance to be, in some dime nickel packages, like at an X amount of number per game. But
yeah,
I think that they're an offense that needs explosive playmakers. Like they need guys that can create big plays. Travis Hunter, I expect to be the number 2 overall pick. So that's a long way of saying I think it's highly likely that that's the first 2 overall selections in this draft.
I think I obviously tend to agree with you. It feels like the draft starts at number 3 with the Giants, the first real decision to make probably. Now, obviously, if the Browns were to go Abdul Carter at number 2, that changes it because then it brings Travis Hunter into the equation now. But it feels like most of the discussion, like they went out and they added Jameis Winston, they went out and added Russell Wilson, so they got a couple of veteran quarterbacks of suspect whatever levels. Do they go with Abdul Carter potentially? Do they go Shedeur Sanders? I mean, this is the conversation or the debate that has been driving, all the talking head TV for well over a week now, a couple of weeks that we're going on. I can't wait till the draft gets here, so it's all over. So what do you think ultimately they do with that pick at number 3, the Giants?
I'll throw in one other player or another position that could be in the conversation. That's offensive tackle. I mean, they have a pretty big need potentially at right tackle specifically. Obviously, they have Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas gets hurt all the time though at left tackle, but Evan Neal's been a flop at right tackle. So I think offensive line's even on the possibility list as well. Like if you're talking about a Will Campbell from LSU or you're talking about Armin Membu, the offensive tackle out of Missouri, like I think that position is just generally speaking on the table as well. I don't know, to be honest with you. Like, I have no idea what the Giants are going to do. The practical thinker in me says that head coach Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen are on the hot seat, right?
Yeah.
Going into the year. So
gotta be.
It makes sense that they went out and got a Russell Wilson. I know he's diminishing returns, but he's still a good enough quarterback, an experienced enough quarterback to hopefully raise your floor as a team, at least in the immediacy. Obviously, he's not the long-term future, but it felt like they went veteran quarterback to try to win now, or at least win more. Like I think they're hopeful that they can get to like 8 wins this year and preserve the job and say like, oh, now we get our quarterback in the room, we have a future, right? Like I think that's what they're trying to do ideologically. But if they drafted Shedeur Sanders, I wouldn't be shocked. Like I think they're an organization that's not run very well, to be honest with you, right? So like I have no idea what they're going to do.
Which is kind of astonishing because for a long time they were a pretty well-run organization.
They were. Yeah, the Mara family, traditionally had been what they were, right? And they were consistent with like the Tom Coughlin era and all that type of stuff. Like they were Bill Parcells before that. Like they were a very well-run organization for a very, very long time. It's not that organization anymore. Like they're just not the same. And here's the interesting part too, Sean, is that if Travis Hunter goes number 2, it makes things even weirder, right? Because I think if Travis Hunter's on the board at number 3, I think that's easy for the Giants because they have needs at wide receiver outside of Malik Neighbors, and they have needs at corner. So that's a guy that could potentially fill either one of those spots or a little bit of both, in a
especially
so
when you did just add 2 veteran quarterbacks. Give one of them as many playmakers as possible.
Yeah. And Abdul Carter, I think Abdul Carter is the best player in the draft. Like, I think he is. And I think he's one of the 2 top guys in this draft, whether you have him at 1 or 2. I think he is one of those guys. But also the issue with the Giants is that you do have Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. So it's not like you have no defensive ends either, right? Like, that's actually one of your strongest points on the entire roster. So I think it's going to be Abdul Carter. I think it's going to be an offensive tackle. I don't know which one it'll be. But I can't really rule out quarterback because again, I just don't think they're a very well-run organization. I don't think they have a lot of foresights in this conversation either. Like I just don't think they have it. So they are the ultimate wild card because I think at least most teams, especially in the top 10, I have like a little pulse of like what I think they're probably going to do, right? Some more than others. The Giants are one where I'm just like, it really does start at number 3. The draft really does start them because they can go in a couple different ways, and it's going to completely shape what the rest of the top 10 looks like in the first round after that. So I would be, if I was betting man, I would probably go Abdul Carter with slight odds to be the pick. Offensive tackle would be the next down, but again, you can't take quarterback off that ballot right now. You just can't.
Okay, so I'm going to go two-part on you then with this
Yeah.
next one. If Sanders falls, or if he goes past the Giants, how far does he fall? But couple in with that, Jalen Milroe over these last few weeks has become the trendy guy, like
Yep.
hearing his name in the first round. Could Milroe actually go ahead of Sanders if Sanders doesn't get picked at number 3?
I'd be very surprised if Milroe or Jackson Dart went before Sanders. But I will say I do think Sanders is going to fall a little bit in this class. But like when I say fall, for a little while we were talking about them going 1-2 at quarterback, right? Like Cam Ward and then Shador would be it, or it would be vice versa early on in the process. I think there's a possibility that Shador falls. Now, fall, I think most likely destinations. I think a team maybe like the Pittsburgh Steelers moves up for him, maybe at like pick 8, because New Orleans has obviously quarterback needs with the Derek Carr situation at number 9. So maybe a team jumps up to go number 8. Maybe New Orleans takes him at number 9. Or he could potentially fall. I think it was Eric Edholm at NFL.com like last week or the week before, and I love Eric. He's awesome. He had the Cleveland Browns actually coming back into the first round to get Shador after drafting, I think, Abdul Carter at number 3. So like that was a little bit of an interesting one ultimately, or number 2, excuse me. So I think he falls. I think it's likely back end of the top 10, but I wouldn't be shocked if he falls somewhere into the early teens. I think that that's possible, but I don't think a Milroe or a Dart jumps him. I've been pushing back constantly. I think there's a chance that someone takes Jalen Milroe in the back end of the first round. I think that's possible. I think the Jackson Dart stuff is all a farce. Now we'll see if I'm right or not on Thursday. Like we will see, but I personally just haven't heard anybody that I know in the league, right? Like my sources, the people that I know that are like super high on Jackson Dart. Like I just haven't heard it personally, right? So maybe it's all a smokescreen. Maybe they're not being honest with me. That's always possible, but I tend to think that Milroe will be the third quarterback off the board, but I think it's more in like the back end of the late 20s or maybe in the 30s.
Okay. Ashton Genty, top running back in this draft. Most people have had him slotted in to the Raiders at number 6 for a long time, but I'm also starting to hear, more buzz that he might even go before that potentially. Like maybe Mike Vrabel out there in New England could be coveting Ashton Genty. So where do you have Genty right now?
Yeah, the Raiders at 6 is a very interesting one, obviously, and it's been kind of a huge talking point. For the longest time, it was Dallas at 12, right? Like that was the one. It was like Genty to Dallas at 12, and it was the most popular pick. But I think the more information we've gotten on this class, and a couple guys start falling down the boards because of medicals or off the field, all that type of stuff. Ashton Genty is just like one of the easiest evaluations in this class, man. Like I had a buddy who was in the NFL. I was texting with like last week, and I forget if I said it or he said it, but one of us said just point blankly, what does Ashton Genty not do well? Right? Like at least on a good level, what does he not do well? And the answer is like nothing, like he can pass protect, he can catch the football, he runs with great contact balance, he has good short area explosiveness. Like he's just a very complete overall player. Like he's going to be a perennial 1,000-yard rusher in the NFL and probably catch 50 plus passes as well. Like this is a dude, man. Like he's a really good player, and it's not a great overall draft at the top. I mean, most teams only have between like 9 or 10 first round grades this year. Like it's just not a great class. So I think it's a foregone conclusion that Genty's going to go top 10. I think Raiders makes a lot of sense. You mentioned New England at 4. They're interesting. I've also heard a little bit about Jacksonville buzz, even though they have Travis Etienne. Etienne's kind of on the downtrod a little bit, continues to get hurt, and he's on, I think, the last year of his rookie contract as well. So I think 4, 5, 6, he could go somewhere in that bucket. If he gets past that, Chicago at 10 would make some sense, right? And then somehow if he got there to Dallas, like I think the floor absolutely is number 12 to Dallas, the very end of the floor. But I do think 4, 5, 6, somewhere in that ballpark could be a Genty pick without question.
Kind of seems like it because he's undoubtedly the number 1 guy in this class. And so you've brought up the Cowboys a couple of times. You probably knew I was going to ask you about the Cowboys at number 12, because let's assume that Genty is off the board, because really it feels like, again, with all this buzz that he's getting, that he's going to be gone before number 12. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the top 2 options for Dallas seem to be another running back, Omarion Hampton from North Carolina, or Matthew Golden, the receiver from Texas. So who's going to make me happier at number 12 if that's what ends up happening. It's one of those two guys.
Man, that's a great question. I'm not a huge Hampton fan at 12. Like I just think that's
I think that's too much. I think it's too much for him. Yeah.
I think he's getting pushed up a little bit because there's a next tier of running backs that are all really good. They're all good backs, but there's definitely a little bit of a tier break there, but around the league as far as like who they view at running back 2 comparative to what these. Because it's funny when you get into the next tier of like running back 3 to like running back 8, they're all kind of like similarly graded. You know, it's like if I get any one of those guys, I got a good player. Ultimately.
So you're feeling good with whoever you're going to end up with in the second round, is what you're saying.
That's why honestly, if I was Dallas, I wouldn't force a running back at 12. I really wouldn't. A guy that I think is actually interesting that I've heard a lot of buzz on as far as like Dallas likes him a lot is Ted McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona. You know, the big body guy, 6'4.5". He ran 4.53 at the pro day. I think that number's a little bit. It's a little bit pumped up, to be honest. Like I don't think it's a legit number, but Dallas needs a playmaker, obviously on offense. Running back, wide receiver is the easy talking point, but also I will say they also need a guy that fits well with a player like a CD Lamb, because CD Lamb is fantastic, right? But CD Lamb also operates a heavy amount out of the slot. I think Matthew Golden could play some Z, like he can move around a little bit, but I do think a lot of spots that make sense for him is also in the slot. So I actually think that's a little bit of a clunky fit together. I mean, it could work because they can be a little bit, interchangeable and that type of thing. But I actually think Ted McMillan's a very interesting one because Dallas doesn't have like that big boundary type of outside receiver that will kind of open up the middle of the field a little bit more for guys like a CD Lamb or like a Jake Ferguson when he's healthy at tight end. So I actually think Ted McMillan's a more interesting one. Out of Golden and Hampton, I would be more okay with Golden because I do think he's a good football player ultimately, but just kind of put an extra name out there. I have heard a lot of buzz as far as I think Dallas does like Ted McMillan out of Arizona a good bit.
Interesting. I've like things I've read about him a little bit, up and down, like work ethic type things and those kind of.
I will say, I think that Dallas is a perfect spot for him if that is ultimately the pick, because one, I think he fits well with CD, but also I think he's I think he's more T Higgins than he is Jamar Chase. As far as I think that he's a great number 2. Like I think he's a tremendous number 2, but I also think he could be like a low end 1, like a number 1 wide receiver. But if he's with a CD Lamb, obviously all the attention is going to go to CD because he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And I think that will give Ted McMillan a lot of one-on-one matchups, and he has that big catch radius. I'm not like the biggest Ted McMillan fan of all time, but if we're talking about the fits that make him the best possible outcome for him, I do think having a guy like a CD Lamb to take some attention off of him is a really interesting proposition.
Okay, so I've enraged everybody enough with Cowboys talk. Let's
comes back to the Cowboys with you, man.
It does. Comes back. Yeah. I know. Can't get around it. Let's get to some Notre Dame guys, because there is a pretty good cluster of guys who are going to hear their names called, over the course of this draft coming up this weekend. So Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison, who ultimately do you think hears his name called first? Probably on Friday would be my guess.
This is a shocking comment that I would not have expected a couple months ago, but I think it's Xavier Watts. I think it's Xavier Watts. I do. The more I dig into it, and I haven't heard any necessarily what I would call negative feedback from Morrison as far as like the injury stuff, but I just know there's some people around the NFL that I have talked to that are still a little bit like corner with a hip injury, right? Like that's not a great place to be. It's just not. Xavier Watts is a guy that NFL, I think, is pretty high on for the most part. Like, I think he's a very clear, like, safety 3 conversation this year, because you have Malachi Starks out of Georgia. You have Nick Emenwari out of South Carolina. But who's that third safety off the board? Very interesting conversation around Watts, because he tested relatively well at the pro day. I mean, again, like, he tested how I thought he was going to test. He's just an average, solid NFL athlete. He's not a great athlete, but he's a really instinctual football player. He's got great eyes, always in the right place at the right time, like all those type of little intricacies to playing the position, which I think has made him a very desirable player. So here's a hot take. If there is a Notre Dame player that goes in the first round, it will be Xavier Watts, I think.
Okay.
Not saying he will, but if there's the most likely outcome, I think it's him, because I think that he just brings a little less question marks, right? Like, he's a fine athlete for a safety on the NFL level. He's incredibly productive. He's always available, and he's a great kid, right? Like Morrison's a great kid too. He's a great young man, but the availability is the major question mark. So I'm going to say that Xavier Watts goes before Morrison, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's the guy that ends up going late first round potentially.
Okay. So saying that, you don't think that he's going to probably go past the second round?
Oh yeah. Oh, I'd be shocked. Yeah, I'll say shocked. I'd be shocked if he wasn't a top 64 selection. I would actually be very surprised if he wasn't a top 50 selection. I think that Xavier Watts is he's had a squeaky clean process. He had a great final year, obviously. He's got a lot of ball production, so I think he will be steadily into the top 64 picks. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously how teams feel about Morrison and his health is going to determine ultimately where he goes. I mean, it feels like third round hopefully is the floor for him. I mean, we're talking about a first round talent, but a major injury that he's got.
Yeah, I don't think he falls past like top 75, somewhere in that ballpark, talking about Morrison, but he has a lot of outcomes potentially because again, I don't think the medicals came back poorly from what I've heard as far as like his recovery and all that type of stuff. But just generally speaking, a player who lacks play strength and still needs to answer some question marks there from tackling and just, at the catch point, like that type of stuff, that has in the last 12 months had a shoulder surgery and a hip surgery it's a little checkered, right? So you could tell me that Benjamin Morrison goes number 37 overall. I don't even know who has the 37th pick. So this is just in a vacuum. Like if you told me he went 37th overall, I wouldn't be shocked. I'd be slightly surprised, but if he went that high, okay. But I also would not be shocked if he's picked 70. You know what I mean? Of like, just early portion of the third round. I don't think he falls drastically, as in like, I don't think he's going to fall out of day 2. Like, I don't think that possibly is going to happen to him. But I do think that the medicals and just kind of your comfort of him long-term is going to be a question that people need to answer for themselves. Well, they have answered it at this point. We'll see what the team feedback is on that side of things.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Riley Mills, do you think he gets drafted or is he a potential free agent sign?
No, he'll get drafted. I actually think, I wouldn't be shocked if he goes earlier day 3, maybe than some people expect, because I know he got hurt, but he's a good athlete. He's a bigger body. There's still developmental upside there, and he was having a really good second half of the year before he got injured against Indiana. So I think that teams will still like him. I would still say he probably goes 5th round, give or take a round. So if he goes in the 4th, wouldn't be shocked. If he goes in the 6th, also wouldn't be shocked. But I think he's pretty clear to get drafted because again, he has some playmaking potential and he's a bigger body with athleticism. So although the injury stinks for Riley, I do think that he'll get drafted for sure.
Actually, before I ask you about Riley Leonard, who's going to be the third Notre Dame player drafted? Assuming Watts and Morrison are the first 2. Who's going to be the third Notre Dame player drafted?
I think we just talked about him. I think it's going to be Riley Mills. Yeah.
Really?
Okay. Yeah.
Even with the injury.
Because there's going to be, I think so because I think there's going to be mixed reviews of Riley Leonard as a player. I'm sure we'll talk about him in a second. Howard Cross is, underwhelming size and he was banged up the majority of the year. And then after that, you're talking about like Mitchell Evans has a lot of the durability stuff we've talked about as well in the past, right? And then Jordan Clark's more of a priority free agent and RJ Oben's not going to get drafted. So like, yeah, I would still say Riley Mills. Like, again, I wouldn't be shocked if Riley Mills, there was actually a mock draft. I think it was Kuiper or it may have been Kuiper. I forget who it was. Maybe Matt Miller, someone at ESPN though, I think. That actually had Riley Mills sneaking into the back end of the third round. It's like,
wow.
Like pick 80 something or something. I don't think he'll go that high, but I do think there's still some love around his developmental upside and just what he was doing for Notre Dame before he got injured.
Sure. And I mean, you're basically kind of like what happened with Jalen Smith, like rookie season's probably going to be a red shirt type year, but team would obviously have the rights to him. And then, that just kind of, extends, down the road, what you get out of him, that kind of thing.
And it's just not it's not a great draft it's a really good defensive tackle draft. So when I say this, just that grain of salt in there. So it's possible that he falls, but I will say after about like the top 75 picks of defensive tackles, and again, it's a really deep class, you start to get more into like the guys that are just pure point of attack players, right? Like nose tackle types. There's not a lot of playmakers in that day 3 bucket. There's not a lot of guys that have some sack production, penetration upside, and Riley Mills does have that, right? So I think that makes him a little bit more valuable in this class than maybe some people realize because he does have that playmaking potential on the interior.
Okay, Riley Leonard, pretty much across the board, it feels like people have him about, like ninth rated quarterback in this draft. So what do you think happens with Riley? Does he get drafted when it's all said and done?
Yep, I think he gets drafted. He's liked around the league from the intangible side of things. I mean, as you know, Sean, covering him, like he's a great guy, right? Like he's a really easy person to root for, like heavy in his faith. He's squeaky clean off the field. He hasn't gotten arrested or doesn't have. I mean, I know he had the injury with like the foot, but like other than that, he hasn't been like crazy where you're like, oh my god, the durability is horrible. Like I think that he is viewed as a pretty high floor person, and I think that he still has developmental potential as a quarterback on the next level. But here's the thing. He's an NFL athlete for sure, right? Like he's a great athlete. He has some tools as a passer that he can continue to develop. So I think he's somewhere in like the 5th to 6th round bucket, like right in there. I think he's a day 3 dart throw because he has athletic traits and there's going to be a team that's kind of enamored with him as a person as well. So I think all those things line well with Riley to potentially get drafted. And I'd actually be very surprised if he didn't get drafted. I think 5th to 6th round, somewhere in there, I could see Riley Leonard coming off the board.
So we talked about Morrison and Watts. That's 2 defensive players. We talked about Riley Mills. That's 3. Then you got Howard Cross, Jack Kaiser, Jordan Clark. You got Rod Hurd, if you want to include him in the mix as well in terms of draft eligible. So you got about, 7-ish guys. How many of them end up in training camp with the Cincinnati Bengals this summer?
So funny, man. There's been like a kind of a betting, a running tab on one of Benjamin Morrison, Xavier Watts, or Jack Kaiser ending up a Cincinnati Bengal because it makes a lot of sense, right? Like the Bengals have a lot of needs on the defensive side of the ball. They have huge needs at corner, safety, and linebackers. So like that makes a lot of sense. I will say at least one of those guys is drafted by Cincinnati, right? Like I think it will happen. Kaiser will be drafted more than likely. We've talked about Morrison and Watts. We talked about Riley Mills. I think there's still a chance that Howard Cross gets drafted. I could see him going undrafted just because of the size and kind of the banged up year, but I also could see him going 5th, 6th, 7th round, somewhere in that ballpark as well. One of those players I think will be drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals. If not, like, you got to think like a Jordan Clark gets picked up as a
free agent
priority
sign.
free agent in Cincinnati, like that type of stuff. So I think at least one will get drafted by Cincinnati. I don't really know which one it will be, but my money would be on one of Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison, or Jack Kaiser to be a Cincinnati Bengal.
What about Mitchell Evans? I just realized I hadn't asked you about him. Where does he fall into this whole piece this weekend?
Mitchell will get drafted too. He'll definitely get drafted. I think that he's more like he's probably around 5th rounds. I think if he had a big year, if he had a good year, if he had a full year of what he was doing in 2023, I think he could have been like a 3rd round pick-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. But the durability stuff's just not great, right?
Yeah.
Like he's been banged up so much. He's been often injured, and he tested pretty well at like the pro day, ran like 4.69, I think was his number that he ended up running after running like 4.72 at the combine. So like he's a good athlete or a solid athlete for the NFL as far as tight ends, but he's just not like overly dynamic as an athlete, and he has the durability stuff. So I think he's going to be more in like that mid day 3 bucket. It is really a shame though. Like if he would have been fully healthy in 2023 and would have done exactly what he did, the 8-game stretch he had and just finished out that season and declared for the 2024 NFL draft, I bet he would have been a top 100 pick around there. Like he would have been probably maybe borderline, bottom half of the 3rd round. It's just unfortunate the injuries just stifled his career a little bit. So I'll say around the 5th round for Mitchell Evans.
I just realized I didn't ask you, Riley Leonard. Are you still mocking him to Baltimore right now? Is that's the last time we talked a couple months ago?
Makes a lot of sense, man. Yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense. Here's a weird thing. I do think that there's something to be said about a backup quarterback that kind of has a stylistic comparison to your starter, and I think that you can make those things with, like, obviously he's not Lamar Jackson, but he's a run throw threat. So having that little bit of a background, I think is pretty interesting, and we've seen Baltimore do that a lot, right? They brought in guys like Snoop Huntley and
well, that's why
like that.
I was shocked that they went out and got Cooper Rush. Like what?
So strange.
Made no sense to me. Yeah,
I can't wait to see him run a quarterback counter or quarterback power. It's gonna be fantastic for Central Michigan great Cooper Rush. But I don't know what that was about. But I do think that there's I mean, there's some. I'll give you another one. The Jets, now that they have Justin Fields, like that would be an interesting backup day 3 dart throw type of option. So
Mhm.
I do think that in order for Riley to make a roster in 2025, I think the scheme fit is going to be so important. Like Riley
Yeah,
Leonard's
me
not going to
too.
go into a room and just be like, "Oh man, that passing is so good right now that we're just going to rely nothing on that." Like he has to be able to utilize his legs, and I think that the scheme fit is going to matter a lot for him.
For sure. Total agreement with that. All right. Ryan Roberts, our old buddy from A to Z Sports.com. You can check out all of his stuff there. When do you post? Have you posted your final mock? When's the final mock come up? Would you do one tomorrow, like
Yeah.
Wednesday before the
No,
draft, or like
no,
draft morning?
yeah, we have one early this well, I should have asked you exactly when you're posting this. What is this? What is this going up?
This is Tuesday, Ryan. I
This is
don't know what you're
Tuesday. Okay.
talking about.
So yesterday, my last mock draft would have went up, which is a 2 rounds collaborative mock draft between the 8 people on the NFL draft team at A to Z Sports. So that's my last one.
All right.
Throughout the week, there's going to be a couple that are sprinkled in from team mock perspectives, just more like Cincinnati Bengals 7-rounder, like that type of stuff. But so if you go to my byline on A to Z Sports, you can click my name. You can go to all my articles straight chronologically for when they've been posting, and you'll probably see a bunch of team-centric mocks on top of that Monday collaborative effort from the full A to Z team.
Sounds good. Ryan Roberts. All right. So I'm getting I had queued up this this video of Benjamin Morrison. There we go. And I'm getting the audio was playing in my ear right as Ryan was was winding down because obviously we talked about Benjamin Morrison during that little segment with Ryan Roberts, and someone asked while that was going on, how was BMO's recent pro day? How was it received? Favorable reviews. I haven't heard any actual reviews. I'm going to try to play this though. You can kind of see there is Benjamin Morrison right there at said pro day. This is courtesy of Channel 12 in Phoenix, where they're doing this at Brophy Prep. You can kind of see Benjamin Morrison running around, playing the ball in the air, looking pretty good, moving out there on the field anyway. I did see that there were like 20 some NFL scouts or NFL teams that were represented down there, including, as Jesse Stiers joins me right now, the Dallas Cowboys were down there for that workout to watch Benjamin Morrison yesterday, Monday, do his workout as he comes back from that hip surgery that he had during the season, missed pro day, missed the NFL combine, and all that good stuff. So hopefully things work out for him. That would be interesting if he ends up down there in Dallas, I think, to say the least. That is one of the needs that they have. One of the many needs, actually, Jess, because Salty, of course, was nice enough to post this. Dallas needs a wide receiver for sure, and offensive line, and defensive line, and safety. What is BC? Maybe he's talking about cornerback. I don't know. Safety, tight end, running back. Yes, they need a little bit of everything. And then Christopher says, let's just trade Dak and get more draft picks out of this whole thing. What do you think about that as a draft plan?
I don't like that as a draft plan.
I don't either. I don't think I'm trading Dak Prescott. That would not be my plan, even though you would get I think you'd get a nice haul, potentially, of draft picks out of that, or, at least a couple good ones out of it, I think, don't you?
Yeah, but I never want to restart at the quarterback position. It's such an unknown. It's hard to find a good NFL quarterback. And teams like the Browns are still looking for an NFL quarterback. So, it's just, if you can lock down a good, solid NFL quarterback, then that's half the battle, in my opinion. I think what they need to be more concerned about is what kind of pieces can they add to help Dak out a little bit, and then just getting a little bit stronger on the defensive side of the ball.
Joseph is a Giants fan. He says he wants no part of Shedeur Sanders. He is not that good. I would not take Shedeur Sanders either, Joseph. I would take, if I were the Giants, considering they already have Russell Wilson and they already have Jameis Winston. They have signed 2 veterans, to come in there and play quarterback. I would not in the first round anyway. I would not be drafting a quarterback in the first round. I would consider it in the second round. I would just take Abdul Carter. As a Cowboys fan, I don't want Abdul Carter, playing in my division, but that's who I would take if I were the Giants. I mean, the Giants are in a position, obviously, where as the head coach and the general manager, Shane and Dable and Shane, they've got to win right now. So drafting a quarterback that high at number 3 does nothing for them. If anything, I would consider trading down, because apparently there are some teams who are interested in moving up. I would consider trading down and grabbing an extra draft pick or 2 if I were the New York Giants with that spot. What do you think?
Yeah, if I'm the New York Giants, I would definitely not draft quarterback. I would probably take Carter, like you were talking about, an elite edge pass rusher. If there's no one that they're super sold on, draft or trade back a little bit, maybe get a 2-for-1 in terms of 2 first-round picks for 1. There's a good amount of quarterbacks. You might as well just pick one up in like the 5th or 6th round, to be honest with you. I don't think that you want to use – the Giants have more glaring needs than quarterback right now, and you signed 2 veteran quarterbacks. So that should kind of hold you over for at least the next couple of years while you maybe stockpile draft picks in other areas.
Christopher's asking Abdul Carter's injury status. The last I saw, I know he had a stress fracture, and I don't think he was able to go through the NFL Combine, but I saw that he was recently cleared. He's supposed to be fully healthy right now. So, I mean, I don't think there are any injury concerns with Abdul Carter right now. There's Ryan Roberts. We just had on the show. Thanks for hopping in, Ryan. Thanks for doing it once again in the chat. On vacation, bebopping and scatting all over the country.
I need to know where he has Shedeur Sanders falling to. So please put that in the chat at some point, Ryan.
I should know off the top of my head, because we just got done talking about it in that interview, and I was listening, and I can't remember where he said that he's going right now. I'm pretty sure he did say he had Shedeur going in the first round. I asked him about the possibility if Jalen Milroe could actually go before Sanders, but he didn't see that as a possibility. So Ryan said I wasn't listening. Well, what's the answer, Ryan? Where do you have Shedeur going? If you're still chiming in, where do you have Shedeur going in the draft? That's what Jesse wants to know right now. All right. He thinks the Steelers trade up a few to grab him. I think that would be interesting, because they're sitting there at 21 right now, and obviously they're one of the teams being talked about, in terms of a fit for Sanders. I think the Saints, once you get past the Giants, the Saints and the Steelers seem to be the 2 teams that you hear the most right now. So that would be very interesting. All righty, Jesse. Well, it's halftime, and we're coming out of halftime, coming out of the locker room. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am. It's time for me to take this show on home.
All right. We've got plenty that we're going to hit here in rapid fire. We've got plenty of Notre Dame stuff, plenty of and we'll actually, in tomorrow's rapid fire, we'll have more NFL draft talk as it pertains to Notre Dame as well. My question, though, right now, to lead you off in this one, between CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey, who has more pressure on him in the battle to win Notre Dame's QB1 job?
This is an interesting question, because I don't know. It's like, is there? I thought the most pressure was on the guy that ended up transferring, right? And so I feel like ever since Angeli left, it has actually maybe taken that pressure off of them to a bit of to a degree, because now it's a 2-man race, and that either one of them is going to be the starter, and they essentially have a 50-50 chance. But I would say that there is more pressure on CJ Carr at the end of the day, and the rationale that I'm going to go with is I think he's a bit more talented. and he's a bit younger as well. And so if he doesn't get the starting position, he would kind of have to transfer out, restart, and essentially kind of
Well,
find
he doesn't have to,
a
but
new home.
it would make sense for him to do that.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's ultimately what would happen if Minchey got the starting position. In my opinion, I think that he would end up transferring out. But then you look at on the flip side, I think Minchey has a little bit less to lose because he's more under the radar. He's not highly recruited. He's not, considered maybe the next great or the next prophecy at the quarterback position since Brady Quinn, Jimmy Clausen, whoever you want to put on that list. But if you're Kenny Minchey, the part that would make it a little bit more tougher for him is he's later on in his career. So his hourglass of sand, if you will, is getting shorter and shorter, right? Like his gap for actually being a college quarterback is getting smaller. CJ Carr, if he didn't get the starting position, he would naturally have more time to figure it out elsewhere. So I think that would bode well for him. But I think just because, Kenny Minchey isn't as talented as CJ Carr, he's a little bit under radar. He doesn't get as much kind of publicity as CJ Carr does. CJ Carr is like considered the golden child pretty much right now, I think, at Notre Dame. And so, again, it's very even, and I think you could make an argument for both sides, but I would have to lean towards CJ Carr just because of everything that comes with him, the name, his talent coming out of high school, and the expectations to really turn this quarterback room around at Notre Dame and no longer have to be, a portal team when in terms of searching for a starting quarterback. They want a guy that they can develop and have for multiple years.
DJ says they both have pressure, and I agree with that. I think they both do have a certain amount of pressure on them because they're battling to be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. But the question is, who has more pressure? Because I do think you can build a case for both of them. And, kind of like what you were alluding to with CJ Carr, there are all these expectations on him, and like there's been a certain amount of hype, that comes with being CJ Carr through his recruitment, obviously going back to, what his last name is, the fact that he is the grandson of a Michigan head coach who, other than Jim Harbaugh, was, the next most recent to win a national championship. And, I think he took himself away from a lot of the pressure that would have come with being potentially the quarterback at Michigan and everything that would have come with that. I think the microscope, even as much microscope and focus as comes with being the quarterback at Notre Dame, I think there would have been even more for him at Michigan because of that, because that he is the grandson of Lloyd Carr. And his dad obviously played there as well. So I think that there would have been even more had he gone there. Now, there's still a certain amount that comes here because, again, of how good he is, because of all the talk and the hype and the expectation that he is now going to be the guy. I think there's more on Kenny Minchey, though, because of the fact that Kenny Minchey didn't come in with necessarily the same hype, but, in terms of recruiting rankings, he came in obviously, higher rated than Steve Angeli, and a lot of people, justifiably so, were very excited when Notre Dame was able to flip him from Pittsburgh when he came in, and we've kind of been waiting to see what he can do. And now, because he's a year older than CJ Carr, I think there's more on Kenny Minchey in terms of what's going to happen in his career. Because like you said, if Carr doesn't win it, then odds are that he transfers out. But I mean, it's definitely the same for Kenny Minchey, that he's most likely going to transfer out at some point if he doesn't get the job. So I feel like there's more for him because he's a year older. That clock has already started. He's used a redshirt year already. So, he'll either have unless if he were to lose the job in fall training camp and he just decided, well, I'm done, I'm gone, then you would gain an extra season, obviously, of eligibility that way. But otherwise, there's more on the line, I think, for Minchey because of what happens if he doesn't win the job. You good over there?
Yeah, sorry, my allergies have just been attacking me today.
That'll happen. That'll happen. It's springtime in the Midwest. The trees there in Cleveland, though, like none of that's as bad as when you used to live in Michigan, is it? Like,
No,
were the
just
allergies even worse up there?
no. The allergies were definitely worse in Michigan. It's just with the fluctuating temperatures, it's like a changing seasons every day, and
Yeah, I
so
know.
my allergies just
From
like
morning to afternoon sometimes.
right. And so it's like in the morning I feel fine, but then when I leave work and start going outside and it's a little bit warmer, then like all the pollen and stuff is all in the air and it like drives my eyeballs crazy. And it's like I take an allergy pill every morning and it might be the interaction with my contacts as well. So I just need to get LASIK eye surgery, I think, and it would alleviate a lot of my problems.
There you go. Costs money though. DJ saying no Cowboys stuff in terms of draft talk tomorrow. I cannot guarantee you anything.
I mean, the draft is in 2 days, you know?
That's right. Gotta throw something out there. We tend to, if we do Cowboys talk in rapid fire, we tend to save it for one of the last topics, right? Like we let ourselves vent at the end of the show and we do all the other more pertinent stuff first, but we save our time, we save ourselves those last few minutes to vent
Our
on Jerry
monologues.
Jones. That's right. That's right. Let's stick with the quarterbacks. Give me 2 words to describe CJ Carr.
Yeah, I think word number 1 would be gifted. And then the second word would be I'm trying to find a word that can encapsulate kind of the stuff that I'm going to go with charismatic. And if you ask me to elaborate, I'd be more than happy.
Absolutely.
So
I didn't want just 2 words from you. Like give me your 2 words and then explain.
So gifted, the reason I go with gifted is I think he has tremendous arm talent. I think he has really good accuracy and the ability to kind of what I would call the Patrick Mahomes effect. Like he can go off schedule and throw, those sidearm passes, 3-quarter passes.
Arm talent.
Yeah, arm talent. And so I think all of that falls under gifted, big arm, accurate arm, can make a multitude of different kinds of throws. So that's where I'm going with gifted. And then when I'm talking about charismatic, I use the word charismatic because I think he's a natural leader. And more importantly, I would consider him kind of a nerd of the football game. And you're only a nerd of the game when you're passionate about something or when you're charismatic about something. I think often a lot of people talk about, how impressed they are with CJ Carr's ability to really dive into the game and want to understand the game, the X's and O's, the playbook and that sort of stuff. And I think he really loves, the technical aspect of the game. And he's always eager to learn more and be better. And so that's where I came up with the word charismatic, because you have to be passionate and charismatic about what you're doing if you ultimately are, diving headfirst into the finer details and the technicalities of what you're doing.
So charismatic and what was the first one?
Gifted.
Okay. It's in terms of the gifted, I don't think that I'm too far off with what I went with. And I kind of ended up, I ended up just going a little alliteration here. I know they don't teach that word to you in math class, but polished prodigy is what I went with. Polished prodigy. He's not a finished product, but I think that it's more than obvious that Carr has an advanced approach and a feel for the game that stood out when we saw him, first a year ago in the blue gold game and in some practices, and that's what stands out about him right now as well, because like we've seen so many quarterbacks at the same stage in their career where it's like, well, he does X well, but he really struggles with Y, like that kind of like, you don't say that about CJ Carr. He's got great pocket presence, his footwork, I guess what you don't say is he's got good pocket presence, but his footwork could use some work. Like, and like he's got inconsistent ball placement, as a result. We're not saying those kind of things about CJ Carr. So don't get it twisted, like if you're listening to what I was saying there. So, we had someone in the show chat yesterday asking about Angeli and still advocating for Steve Angeli. And he was saying, well, couldn't Angeli still improve if he played more this year? Like if he was the starter, couldn't he still improve? Well, sure, to some extent, but more playing time wasn't going to make his arm stronger than Carr's. And, and Carr has that with less playing time than what Angeli has already. Carr is already better at the pre-snap reads and, going through his progressions, throwing guys open and just on down the line. And so, again, to me, there's a lot of polish for a guy who's only played a couple of snaps. And again, like going back to, all the expectations and everything that came with him when he came out of Michigan, you can see why all those kind of expectations are there because of the polish that he has for so little experience and for a guy who's still as young as he is.
Okay.
So now let's do it with Kenny Minchey. 2 words to describe Kenny Minchey. Go.
Yeah, this one was a little bit tougher. The first word I'm going to go with is gunslinger, and the second word I'll go with is wild card.
So you're going like double compound words there. Gunslinger, wild card. Okay.
Yeah. So
you might technically be cheating, but I'll allow it for this little exercise here.
So the reason I'm going to go with gunslinger is I think that, he's, in terms of making decisions, I think he's, pretty explosive with the ball, and he has kind of less regard technically, like he's more prone to, I think, just kind of cutting the ball loose and then, dealing with the consequences after type situation. He's like, it's that old saying of, like, are you going to ask for forgiveness before or after? He's the guy who's going to do it and then ask for forgiveness afterwards type situation. And so I think that he's got that little bit of a gunslinger mentality. He's willing to cut the ball loose. He's not so worried about the consequences. He just kind of wants to make a play, and he wants to make an explosive play at the end of the day. So I'm going to go with gunslinger to start. And then for wild card, I think I wanted to go with wild card because of 2 things. What I was talking about earlier, he's a bit more under the radar and not as, a household name like CJ Carr is. But then also why I say wild card is because I think there's more to his game is more dynamic than CJ Carr's. And we saw that in the spring game. I think he's got more of Riley Leonard in him, the ability to kind of roll out, make plays with his feet, extend the pocket, make some throws on the run type situation. And so for that reason, I consider him a bit of a wild card in terms of, his style of play.
Yeah, I mean, he feels like much like Leonard, like you roll him out there and he might not just look like a classic quarterback, but there's so much athleticism and ability and a big arm and, all those like different things that you can't teach that come with Kenny Minchey's game, a la a guy like Riley Leonard. And so that's why I went alliteration again, ascending athlete, because we've always known what a great athlete Minchey is, but now we're seeing him put it all together, and his overall play as a quarterback is now ascending as well. And you can see that he's at a different level with his own reads and progressions, and the tools are obviously there as well. You don't see Minchey, like getting hung up on reads and some of that kind of stuff. It doesn't look too fast for him. He obviously has the tools as well. We saw him with the arm throwing the ball downfield a couple of weeks ago at the Blue Gold game. So just an athlete who's ascending as an overall quarterback now is where I put Kenny Minchey. Those are my words for him. I don't think that we were too far apart. DK. That's only one word, DK.
Yeah, and you use that same word for the guy who's no longer on the team. So I'll take that one with a grain of salt.
Speaking of which, I have a can of worms that I just felt like opening up here on the show today. Because there's always a quarterback you can talk about who's going to get people stirred up one way or another, and his name is Steve Angeli. So fill in the blank. Steve Angeli visited Syracuse this week. Steve Wiltfong from On3 has him crystal balled to land now at Syracuse out of the transfer portal. Notre Dame hosts the Orange on Senior Day this season, November 22nd. And it's blank that some fans think Steve Angeli should be honored as a senior at Notre Dame Stadium on that day, even though he's playing for Syracuse.
Yeah, I struggled here to come up with a word that wouldn't be insulting. So I'm going to go with blasphemy. It's blasphemy that people think that Steve Angeli should be honored on Senior Day, even though he would be playing for a completely different team. And the reason why it's blasphemy, if he wanted to be recognized, he wouldn't have left. You know, if you want to be recognized as a Notre Dame senior,
right,
then you don't leave. You're not. Notre Dame doesn't need to honor anyone that's not a part of their team anymore. And it's not like Steve Angeli was this tremendous.
It's literally the meaning of Senior Day.
There's no, Steve Angeli, yes, he had a couple of moments, but he never left a legacy at Notre Dame. It's not like he was a guy who started for 2 or 3 years and then a young guy came in and they decided they needed to kind of move on. Like this isn't Tua and Jalen Hurts vibes where, Tua comes in, he's the young guy and they replace Jalen and Jalen still has the ability to go on to Oklahoma and be super successful and, all the things that came with it. Like he has no legacy at Notre Dame. He will be remembered for his Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl victory and a couple of throws that he made against Penn State, and even if he left some legacy at Notre Dame, he's no longer a part of Notre Dame for this season. So it's just blasphemy. It's stupid. And I hope people really don't think that. And if you do, just sit down and maybe think about it a little bit more.
It's straight up ludicrous is what it is to think that this would be a thing. You only honor seniors, and obviously in some case grad students, who are playing on your team, playing for your team on Senior Day. It is literally the point of Senior Day, is you honor the players who made it from the start of their career until the end of their career at Notre Dame or whatever school that you happen to be at. What are we going to do?
Give him a letter jacket too?
Right. Here's your monogram. I'm sure he already has one of those, but it's literally the point of Senior Day is to honor the players who have stuck all the way through, in your program from start to finish. That is the point of Senior Day. There are plenty of Notre Dame players who play for 3 years and then leave after their junior season to declare for the NFL draft. Well, guess what? They don't get Senior Day recognition either. And, they don't bring them back the next year when they're playing for their NFL team and say, hey, come on, be recognized for Senior Day. It is for seniors. And to be a senior, you have to be there for at least 4 years. And again, grad students get honored too. But Steve Angeli has only completed 3 years at Notre Dame. I realize he has his degree, but he doesn't even meet the requirement to be a senior. He will be a senior with another school now, and like if he had completed 4 years at Notre Dame, he would have been honored at last year's Senior Day when they played Virginia. And oh, by the way, do you know who also played for Virginia and was at Notre Dame Stadium on Senior Day last November? A guy named Chris Tyree, who, of course, started his career at Notre Dame. Did they honor Chris Tyree, who did more in his career at Notre Dame than Steve Angeli did in his? No, they did not. That is the answer. No, they did not honor Chris Tyree on Notre Dame Senior Day when he played for Virginia. So I don't have a problem with Angeli. He worked hard. He got his Notre Dame degree, but so have hundreds of others who have come through the program. And you don't hear them being talked about the way Steve Angeli is being talked about. And I just feel like so much of this groundswell comes from a lot of these disingenuous other people in the media who built Steve Angeli up to be something that ultimately he was not. I don't wish him any ill will. He's in the transfer portal. He's going to be playing for someplace else, but he's not on your program. And you don't honor people who are not on your program and who don't meet the minimal requirement to be a senior in your program on Senior Day. That's literally what Senior Day is for. So it's just ludicrous that anyone would think that he or anyone else should be honored. So, He is being crystal balled, though, to Syracuse. And Jesse, Vince and I are pretty excited about this, I have to say.
Yeah. So there's a couple caveats to this.
Oh, here we go with the caveats.
You guys, if he ends up at Syracuse, you'll get your food. But there's a couple things.
You're
One,
damn right we'll get our food. There's no debate on that.
but the thing is, it's kind of, in my opinion, cheating a little bit, considering he's got pre-existing connections to Syracuse. And I mean, my thing is even if he goes to one of those places, Syracuse, maybe another Power 4, he's not going to be the starter. Like,
I mean,
Steve Angeli's
that's the
game
thing
is
about
not
Syracuse.
comparable to Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord started an entire season for Ohio State, one of the best teams in the country, and went on to set all these passing records at Syracuse. If you think Steve Angeli is stepping in and just going to, pick up the torch where it's left off, I'm sorry. It's just, I don't believe if he truly wants to have an impact and play meaningful games, Power 4 was not the option for him. But if he goes there, yes, you guys win the bet, and that's completely fine. I just don't think he's going to be as successful as he could. He's not going to maximize his potential.
I understand, but as we were trying to tell you last week, and we really were trying to talk you out of this wager to some extent, but you doubled down and you insisted on it. Like, it doesn't matter what the rest of us think about what Steve Angeli and where he belongs and what his place should be. It matters what Steve Angeli thinks. And that was my whole point. Steve Angeli thinks that he's going to go someplace else and be the starting quarterback. Now, going to Syracuse, he's going to walk right into another quarterback battle because Ricky Collins transferred from LSU, and he's going to be battling in fall training camp most likely now to try to be the starting quarterback there. And so obviously if things don't work out, then Steve Angeli could easily be standing on the sidelines, on November 22nd when Syracuse comes to Notre Dame Stadium.
And that's my point. Like,
just like
I felt like Steve should have put himself in a situation where he knew he was going to walk in and be the guy. Like, he was going to be the starter. Like, why would you walk into another quarterback competition? That's where I thought that, like, Power 4 wasn't the best option for him, because if it was truly about starting and not wanting to be a backup and getting your moment, then why would you go to another place where there's a quarterback competition? Go somewhere where you are the guy. Everyone's basically worshiping the ground you're walking on, and you're going to be the starter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, so I realize he's got the connection. His former high school coach is there and all that different stuff, so you've got that, but feels like there had to be some other opportunities potentially for him. I mean, heck, people were talking about him going to Tennessee right off the bat, which was like, think about that. But yeah, I mean, think about, as Ryan was saying, think about going from being the backup quarterback at Notre Dame to being the backup quarterback at Syracuse potentially. So we'll see. And if he loses that battle, I wonder what that does, again, for this Steve Angeli narrative, that's by his ardent supporters as he walks out the door to go to Syracuse. But that'll be something we find out in a few months, if he actually does end up committing to Syracuse.
60% chance, only a 60% chance.
Yeah. 60%, but there's also percentage-wise, even if he doesn't end up at Syracuse, I still will say he's going to end up at some Power 4 program, even if it's not Syracuse. And I'll be taking my Ruth's Chris from you as a fine reward.
I think we agreed on pizza and Culver's. Pizza for you.
I'll take
Culver's.
pizza. I'll take pizza. You could bring that pizza from that Cleveland spot that I like, the New York style.
Make a special delivery
when you come back later this month.
If it happens to go your way, of course.
On the subject, you mean when it goes my way. On the subject of transfer quarterbacks, fill in the blank. It's blank that after Nico Iamaleava committed to UCLA. UCLA quarterback Joey Aguilar is now headed to Tennessee.
It's comical to me that it's just like a merry-go-round, like Nico leaves. And so what does Tennessee do? They go, well, all right, well, the guy that you're probably going to replace isn't going to be too happy. So we'll go ahead and just take that guy. So I think it's pretty hilarious. And I'm actually going to double down on this. I don't know if you saw this, but early enrollee at Arkansas,
yes,
Nico's brother,
yes,
is now transferring to UCLA as well. So, like, what sense does that make? One of you has to be the starter. Why are you going to the same place?
Why would you go to the same place? Because obviously, I would think anyway, they went to the same high school. Why would you want to be your brother's backup again?
Right.
Like
what is? But then is this like UCLA's master plan? They're just going to be set at quarterback for the next 6 years and just, it's just going to be because I'm guessing they're probably very similar, right? Like similar quarterbacks, similar gameplay, similar, strengths, weaknesses. And so like, are you doing a 2-for-1 bundle here basically? And now you got, two brothers for quarterbacks for the next 6 years. I don't know, but the last thing that I would want to do is be my brother's backup at the end of the day. If I had a brother and we were both good enough to play Division I football, the last thing I would want to do is be his backup.
That's the first thing I thought when I saw that is, why would I want to go? Like, okay, yeah, I guess maybe if they're buddy, they're brothers, if they're that close, but why would you want to go back him up? As Andrew says, because Nico thinks he's going pro next year. So little brother, thinks that it's only going to be for, like a 1-year situation. And then he takes the whole thing over. This whole thing is crazy though, because obviously they got an Aguilar from Appalachian State, and he was kind of a, probably not a marquee transfer, but he was a guy, with some experience that UCLA felt pretty good about. And there were some other schools. I thought I saw that North Carolina might have been interested in Aguilar as well. And obviously some other schools were interested in Aguilar. So instead, he kind of just gets the ultimate landing spot. And ultimately, I'll be honest, I think Aguilar is getting the better deal out of this whole thing. He's going to be on a better team, a team that was just in the playoffs last year. UCLA, like Nico can go get his money and have his brother there with him and everything else, but that team is not going to be nearly as good as what Tennessee's going to be this year. So it's kind of, whether it's like a de facto trade or a free agent, kind of signing. I think Aguilar is getting the better deal out of this whole thing.
I thought Joe made a great point in the chat. It's like the Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff trade from a few years ago.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's a really good one, actually.
Swapped. And so, but my thing is imagine you're Aguilar. You go from Appalachian State to now you're on an SEC roster. You know what I mean? Like that is what they call coming up in the world. When you can start out at Appalachian State, and now there's a possibility that you're going to be the starting quarterback for Tennessee and the SEC after they just made it to the playoffs last season. I don't know. I just think that's pretty great.
Tyler wants to know who will have the better season. I mean, I think Nico will put up numbers out there in UCLA. Like Joseph is saying, got a good OC. He'll put up some numbers, and like if you listen to Nico and his family, they're saying it was more about the offense than the money. Okay, but Aguilar might not put up the numbers that Nico does. But just like I said, from a team standpoint, Tennessee's gonna ultimately be the better team than UCLA, and it'll give and that offense is a pretty good offensive system to play in as well. Beefeater wants to know: do you think Syracuse paying Angeli for Notre Dame's playbook? Huh? I mean, I don't think they're bringing in Steve Angeli for one game, if that's what you mean. But that is an interesting way to look at it. And as Joe says, it's not even a given that Aguilar will start. But I'm sure that he's getting a decent NIL check for doing it. Speaking of NIL checks, Cooper Flagg is officially leaving Duke after his freshman season after declaring for the NBA draft. My question is, Do you think that we'll ever see a men's basketball player ever do what Olivia Miles did, stay in school for NIL money by turning down the chance to be a first-round draft pick?
So you clarified and said first-round draft pick. I took it to an extreme, and I'm still going to say no. And the reason why I say that is because Cooper Flagg, being the number 1 overall pick, is going to receive usually a 4-year rookie contract. And that's on average valued somewhere around $50 million.
Now, that's for the entire contract. Like, if you look at it per season, I think it's around $15 million.
Right. Right.
So the question is, could an NBA or could a college program like Duke, Kentucky, maybe Kansas, like one of the blue bloods, probably, like, could they come up with that kind of money to keep a player around for an extra year?
No. And that's why no. And this is the reason why Olivia Miles is staying, is because Cooper Flagg could make more in his literal rookie season than some of these WNBA players might make in their entire career, strictly just playing in the WNBA. Like, no endorsements, strictly your basketball contract. Cooper Flagg, year 1, will probably make 10 to 15 million. That's probably more than most WNBA players are going to make in their entire career.
Right. And I realize, and as people are saying in the chat, this is why I'm asking the question, because I know the money is completely different. You're literally talking, like first-round picks this year for the WNBA are like $75,000. Next year, they're supposed to be, into 6 figures because of the new collective bargaining agreement and all that stuff, versus what we're talking about, 10 to 15 million for a first-round draft pick. But that's my question. Would a college collective be willing to fork out, say 15 to 20 million bucks for essentially the best player in the country to stick around, when you like for what a guy like Cooper Flagg meant to Duke this year? Would they be willing to fork out that kind of money?
No, and I don't think so. And even if you could make the argument, okay, yeah, like number 1 overall, they're obviously going to get the most money. And then maybe you go down the list and say you're the 30th pick of round 1. Well, based off the information that I was able to gather, that person is still making around $3 million a year. And so unless someone in college basketball is going to offer you $3 million or more, why would you go?
I think $3 million. I think that $10 million is not out of the question. Like, if you're a Final Four school like Duke and you've got the kind of alumni base that Duke has, like that you couldn't come up with even like $10 million to get that kind of player back and have another chance to get back to the Final Four and actually win the national championship this time. Like, I think that that's doable. Like a lottery pick type guy, I think it is virtually like you'll never see that happen. But like, to your point, guys, once you get out of the lottery pick range and the farther down in the first round you go, I think it is very possible. But the other side of that is, like, Cooper Flagg is not going to fall into that range, and like, that's the kind of player who you would want to stick around, the kind of guy, because again, it's basketball. So one player can take you a lot farther than one player potentially on a college football team or even a baseball team or whatever it happens to be. But to be the kind of player who can lead you that far, you're going to be much closer to lottery pick range.
I think what also plays into it is these college kids can do one and done. It's not like, women's college basketball where you have to wait, 3 years essentially before you can become drafted. So, I think that factors into it as well. And, I've always been, and maybe I'm wrong, but I've always been under the impression that a lot of these guys have the mentality of like going to the league is a career aspiration.
Right.
And so even if the money is slightly off, at least making it to, like, tomorrow's never guaranteed, I guess is what I'm getting at. And if you have a shot to make it to the NBA, I feel like more often than not, you're gonna pull the trigger on that shot, even if you're, maybe gonna lose out on $500,000.
Well, I mean, look
at
at
the end of
Cooper
the day.
Flagg. Like Cooper Flagg was a freshman stud at Duke this year. He reclassified. He was supposed to be a senior in high school this year. That's how good he was. He reclassified so he could come out early and get his clock going early and get to the NBA. To your point,
Right.
you know, like there's no way a guy like him was going to stick around in school for another year. But I thought it was worth talking about, you know, to see, you know, like
I think you could eventually draw the line somewhere. It's just a matter of where is it like round 1, pick 20? Is it, you know, the whole round 1? But I think that you could make the argument once you get to a certain degree in the NBA. I think definitely lottery picks, no way. But as you get into end of round 1, beginning of round 2, I don't think it's off the table to have the discussion of, you know, are these guys more willing to stay an extra year in college? 1, so they can improve their draft stock, and 2, make similar, if not more money than they would if they went to the NBA.
Yeah. And the other side of this is if you sunk that kind of money into a player to get him to stay and they, you know, the team didn't win the national championship.
Oof.
Or, you know,
You got a lot of unhappy people.
Like injury occurred somewhere along the way. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of ticked off people when it's all said and done. Herrick's saying, how much did Ohio State football roster make to stay? Is college basketball players worth the same? And, you know, again, it's different in college football. And it was what, between 20 and 25 million, I think, is what everyone was talking about. Like the amount of money that went into Ohio State's roster to get guys to stay and transfer and all that different kind of stuff. But again, one player, because you're talking about 22 players on the field at a time for a football team versus 5 players on the court for basketball. So one elite player in basketball can make much more difference. And if you're at a place like a Duke or a Kentucky or a Kansas or a North Carolina, like those alumni bases, you know, like those are the blue bloods, and it means a lot to them. And I think that you would be able to find a lot of people who would be willing, you know, to invest in one player like that, depending on how high the line goes up. I think 20 million is too high, but I don't think 10 or 12 million is unrealistic. Like to think that you could come up with that kind of money. But the question again would be, would it be worth it to the player? And ultimately, if you're going to be a first round NBA pick, I don't think that ultimately, I don't think it's in the same ballpark. I think that, like you said, guys want to go. They want to be professional basketball players and just focus on basketball, because that's the other aspect of it as well. You don't have to worry about school when you're in the NBA. Joseph said Miles took a big risk. Next year's WNBA draft will be significantly better. Very doubtful she'll be a top 5 pick. Well, I mean, I guess we'll see. I mean, I think that at the very least, she thinks she's going to be better. And even if she's not a top 5 pick, she still ends up going in the first round and has somewhere $500,000 in her pocket. That's $500,000 she wasn't going to make, and she still wasn't going to make regardless of which draft she ended up being in.
This is always an interesting conversation to me, because I think being a top 5 draft pick is a double-edged sword. It means you're the best of the best,
but it also
means you're getting picked by a horrible team.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, me personally, like, yeah, it'd be cool to say I was the first overall pick ever, but like, catch me around like round pick 15 or pick 20, so I can go to a team that's on the verge of probably being pretty good, but not quite there. I don't know. I know you get more money too, but I would take less money to be in a more advantageous situation on a team that's, you know, got actual aspirations to make the playoffs. Yeah. And I'm a key part of helping.
Like Aguilar versus I Am Oliva that we were just talking about.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Agree, Joe. She's still making more by waiting that extra year. That's what it comes down to. And that's why she decided to make that decision. Joseph had a good comment on Steve Angeli. I meant to throw this up there earlier. He said, "We did not see much of Steve Angeli. However, my lasting memory of him will be his deliberate manner in the Penn State game. Absolutely no fear whatsoever." Yeah. And like, can't it just be that and not not making it more than that? All these, different, just to me, what turned out to be, absurd expectations that came off that. Can't we just remember him for being a guy who went in and played a a nice part in Notre Dame getting to the national championship game? So Dan Orlovsky says the Pittsburgh Steelers have the worst quarterback situation in the NFL heading into this week's draft, with Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson as their only two quarterbacks currently on the roster. Do you buy or sell that?
I'm going to go with a hold, and the reason I'm going to go with a hold is I think there's some other teams that are treading in the same water as the Steelers, and so I want to put some of those teams out there and see if you feel like they have.
I've got a list of my own as well, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I would start within the division. I think the Browns have a pretty similar quarterback situation going on.
It's a little bit better. I mean, they've got Joe Flacco. They won games with Joe Flacco a couple years ago.
Yeah,
I'd rather have Joe Flacco than Mason Rudolph.
He's old as dirt.
But I'd still rather have Flacco than Mason Rudolph. Okay.
So, well, Steelers still win the battle of being in the crappy situation. Let's kind of keep on going down the list. How do we feel about Tennessee with Will Levis at the helm?
I mean, they're at the top of the list, but fortunately for them, they're also at the top of the draft. So yeah, I mean, like they're going to get Cam Ward if that's what they want to do, right? Like, so I agree. Like they're probably in a worse situation, but because of the fact that they draft first and the Steelers draft 21st, there's a big difference there, right?
Big difference there.
Yeah.
Next on my list, as we continue to kind of scroll down here a little bit, I think the Minnesota Vikings belong on this list because JJ McCarthy, yes, he's a highly, thought. There's high expectations of JJ McCarthy, but he got injured and he's never actually taken an NFL snap. At least Mason Rudolph has played games. And the thing is, in Minnesota, there's no one in the queue for backup at this moment. It's all the eggs are on JJ McCarthy and what's his name, Kevin McConnell can do since he's the quarterback whisperer. They're putting all their eggs in Kevin being able to be this quarterback whisperer and develop a quarterback a true rookie quarterback who has never taken a full snap. So I believe the Minnesota Vikings also belong on this list.
I'd still I agree. It's not a great situation, but I mean, McConnell, the fact that he was able to resurrect Sam Darnold last year, I mean, I think you do have to trust him in terms of what he thinks he can get out of JJ McCarthy and the fact that they were confident enough in McCarthy to let Darnold walk. I mean, I agree. It's not a great situation, but I would still put it a step behind where the Steelers are, a step or two behind where the Steelers are, because at least McCarthy is a first round pick. Like there's no true tarnish on him other than the injury that he had last year.
Yeah. Last but not least, I'm going to throw the New Orleans Saints on this list with the contingency that Derek Carr is not playing this season.
Well, yeah, I mean, if Derek Carr's not playing this season, then yeah, the Saints are probably.
Well, you saw the report that he's got another injury. Like there's potential that he's not going to be able to play this season again. If that's the case, you got Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener, and Ben DiNucci, Dallas legend, as your quarterbacks in line. So I'm going to say if Carr doesn't play, I think the Saints and the Steelers are in very similar situations. And it's take your pick. Would you rather have Spencer Rattler or Mason Rudolph as your quarterback at that point? So
Isn't Ben DiNucci's claim to fame? Isn't he the one that made the hats
hats
with the backward
yes,
Dallas thing on the front?
that is his claim to fame.
Yep. Oh, Ben DiNucci. Yeah.
So I think there's a handful, 4 or 5 teams, but the Steelers are definitely 1 or 2 at the end of the day. I think is what I'm ultimately getting at. But they're going to draft someone. I hope they don't. Well, I kind of hope they do bring in Aaron Rodgers because I don't like the Steelers and I don't like Aaron Rodgers, and I hope that whole thing would just go miserably bad. And so if they did bring in Rodgers, that would be kind of funny in my opinion, because again, I don't care about either, and I kind of have distaste for both as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, that's the other thing with the Steelers. You brought in DK Metcalf, and you don't even have a quarterback to throw him the ball, and that is just
Metcalf and George Pickens. It's but who's throwing these guys the ball?
And that is just a huge recipe for disaster if you don't end up with a better quarterback. Even if you have a rookie quarterback, you're going to have a rookie quarterback potentially if you're able to draft one in the first round, and you've got 2 diva receivers that you're going to have fighting for the football, and they're going to be nothing but mad at your quarterback who's going to be sailing balls long or throwing them into the ground and everything else. Salty says, should the Raiders be on that list? I'd take Geno Smith over pretty much any of the quarterbacks that we listed on any of these other teams. That includes Joe Flacco. I'd take Geno.
I'd take Geno with Pete Carroll.
Feels confident. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The Raiders, the Raiders before they added Geno Smith definitely would have been on that list. But getting Geno changed that quite a bit. Changed it quite drastically. All right. Well, again, we're going to have more draft stuff on tomorrow's show. And of course, the draft starts Thursday night. We got a lot of stuff before that. We've got a Marcus Freeman press conference coming tomorrow as well. Christopher obviously is not a Dak Prescott fan. Man, he has just been bashing Dak this whole show. Just the Dak hate from Christopher. Man, that's disappointing. Hit the like button, though, before you leave. Thanks again to Ryan Roberts for talking a little draft with me earlier. And we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.